Hi there, I'm Ben Warner and I'm here with my good friend and colleague Colin MacPherson, and both of us made the documentary Short Stories, Tales of a Kiosk, and we're just going to have a bit of a chat about it now. So I guess, you came to me, it was quite a few years ago now with this idea. So what was the first spark that got you interested in making the doco?
The first spark, the first thing that happened was, as you know, we had these wonderful old gentlemen who were down at the cafe all the time, and they would tell wonderful, brilliant stories. And I would laugh at these fantastic stories and, you know, the history of Australia and all sorts of things. And I started to take the stories and put them down, thinking that I would make it into a play, and probably into some, whether it was a one-man show or a full-blown play. But I started to write all pieces and put it together, and as I started to do it, I realized that it wasn't really suitable for play. Mm-hmm. As my wife said, nobody could play Basil or Unk and do it justice. Mm-hmm. And I agreed with that because they were such brilliant characters. And then she suggested that it might make a good documentary. And I thought about it, and then I started to take more stories down and more stories, and then the whole thing sort of started to formulate in my mind as a documentary. And then I went and visited my wonderful friend Ben Warner and said, "Would you like to be a part of this documentary?" and that's it. That's how it started. Now, what interested you in making the documentary?
I think it was something quite different for me to do, actually, because I'd been concentrating relentlessly on, making short films and feature films up until this point, and a documentary was something sort of almost completely out of left field as well for me, because it was quite different. And there are certain challenges involved with making a documentary that are quite different to making a film. Least of all which you compile massive amounts of footage. As you can recall, it's like with a film you've got a very specific, sort of structure that you set out with right from the outset because you've got a script. This, we obviously knew what you had a list of things that you wanted to get, and that was obviously key to what we were going for, but then finding the tone, finding the structure for it is almost done after the fact, after we've shot everything, because, and as you can recall, it took us a while to find the right tone and the right edit and all that sort of thing. And a lot of that sort of thing really interested me a lot, and has actually got me interested in possibly doing more in the future. So it was quite an interesting little project to work on. So you actually manage the cafe here, so it has a special place for you, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I think historically any place like this, anywhere in the world, but certainly here in Australia, is very, very important. The historical side of this building and what it's been over generations, and the generations of people who've used it, whether it's been a cafe or whatever, history just seeps out of it. And I think too often we tend to just sort of let things like this just sort of disappear, and the history just goes with it, and I just didn't want that to happen. I just think it's a special place. I think it has a wonderful energy, and I think it gives off the term good vibe. I think it does give off a good vibe. I think people find it a very pleasant and warm place to be. So.
Yeah. Just a little bit off topic. I was just it just occurred to me then that I guess the stereotypical cliche for actors is that they, in between jobs they might work, like waitressing jobs or in hospitality or things like that. But you're a little bit different, aren't you? Because you actually step in and have done a lot of managing of places, haven't you?
Yeah, far too many.
Is there any reason why you went that way, or is it just something that you could do, so you did it?
Yeah, just again, it was primarily to facilitate my acting career and give me time off to be able to do it. And when you're the boss, you can usually give yourself off more time than you can if you're one of the staff members. Yeah, so that was that. I mean, I also have a love of food and as well. Even in my own personal life. But I also think the other thing too is that working in this industry, whether it's a restaurant or a cafe or whatever, gives you the opportunity to communicate. And let's face it, actors are basically communicators. And so talking with people, watching characters, seeing faces, seeing the way people are, it's just a big open book for me. And, it's like, oh, I remember this. And, and you can use it down the track.
Yeah.
So that's also part of it too.
Yeah, yep. Can you talk about some of the characters interviewed for short stories and why they are so special?
Yes. I mean, they're all special in many ways, but in particular, the characters of Jeff Gale, Unk, who is just virtually a living legend down here, and Basil Menny, who the stories and the things that they remembered, even a lot of them that didn't actually make it into the documentary, as you can remember, there were just so many wonderful stories about every area of Australia, not just Sandringham and Bayside, but all over Australia and Papua New Guinea and everything. I mean, so these characters that I just thought it would be an absolute sin if the stories were not put down, if they didn't, if their memory wasn't kept alive in some way. I just thought it would be wrong.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there are many others. Hank Prendergast and Jack Barker. I mean, just to name a few. They're such wonderful characters in their own right, not just historically, but just as wonderful people. And to this day, you can see Hank holding court every morning as people sit around to, have you asked Hank about this? Have you asked Hank about that? I mean, that's just stuff that you can't buy. You couldn't make that up. And I was just lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to work in a place that is conducive to these people to being able to share that with people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I guess, what was the biggest challenge for you in making short stories?
There were two. One was getting some very elderly men who aren't used to microphones or cameras to talk openly. That was a great challenge. And the other one was the editing process, which was, as you know, a very dangerous prospect at times, because we would literally change one frame and it would change the entire slant of the documentary, and we were suddenly going, oh no. It's an amazing process, difficult process, very difficult process. But those are the two biggies.
Yeah. Yep.
And what about you? What did you feel was the biggest challenge in making short stories?
Well, I mentioned a couple of the technical challenges. Editing, we've already gone across. That was a big one. Probably, and you've also mentioned, like you said, getting the people we wanted to interview to get that information that out of them that would best represent what the subject of this documentary is. It's again, that was something I hadn't really had to concentrate or do anything on before. I mean, obviously, because you actually knew them, so it makes it a lot easier. So you can just lower the guard down a bit there, and that can be quite a challenging thing, because it's not like again, I've got that film versus doco thing. You're not. In this case, it's not like directing an actor who will automatically take direction, and you hope will automatically take direction and all that sort of stuff.
That was definitely difficult at times.
So that was a big challenge, and I guess I don't know if I'd call it a challenge, but one of the other things was that coming from where I came from in terms of background and things like that, this was a totally new sort of window into another sort of lifestyle, I guess. It's not that it was totally new, but it's not something that I was automatically familiar with. So as I was going along, even though obviously you were familiar with it because you're steeped in it, I kind of had a bit more of an outside perspective from it.
Yeah.
So,
but that was good though.
Yeah, it depends on how you treat it and all that sort of thing. So I thought, that was kind of interesting the way all that kind of stuff sort of panned out. So,
well, I think that was one of the wonderful things was you having that side of it and me having the passionate side of it and being able to come together and say, okay, well, maybe that's a little too passionate or maybe that's a little too clinical and still get the whole point of the piece across. Yeah, no, I thought that was quite wonderful to work that way.
Yeah. So we held a screening here at the cafe and you put on a lot of that. And how do you think that went and how did you find the experience?
I thought the reaction was unbelievable. The reaction was a lot stronger than I even anticipated. I liked the fact that people found the piece passionate. I liked the fact that they thought that the historical side of it was interesting, that they found the piece as a whole engrossing. I think just having the people here, especially having lost Basil at that point in time, and him being such a big part of the whole area down here, not just the documentary. I think it was a very emotional night for all of us, and not a night that I'll ever forget. I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah. Is there anything you would have liked to have done that didn't get done in the doco, or did it all come out as you'd hoped?
It came out differently than I thought, and we've discussed this a million times. At some point in time, this shed, this building, this 110-year-old beach shed, reared its head and said, "This is really about me," and it did it in its own way, and that I just found absolutely fascinating. That we suddenly realized that the documentary had turned a certain way and gone in a different track. So that was a bit different. The only thing that I'm really disappointed in, and it's not disappointment because it hasn't reached conclusion yet. I would still like to see it go further.
Yeah.
I haven't let that dream go. Might be a while down the track, but it's.
Well, we had discussed that at one point how it's the potential for this can go into a series for different places and that sort of thing. So, and not just like this particular one, getting it out there, but there's a whole host of things that we could do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you have to just. I think there are sort of times and places. I mean, doing this documentary took a long time, partly because we were just doing it on a part-time basis more than a regular full-time basis, but it. As it over that length of time, it sort of matured and grew and became its own little thing, which I thought was quite wonderful to see that sort of growth. I think it has more growth in it, and so for me, it's although the documentary is finished, it's not finished.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not finished yet.
Cool. I think we might end up on there. Well, thanks for listening to us, and I guess we'll just have to get cracking on something new, won't we?
Let's get going.